To what's been happening in our seas here in New Zealand and in Australia, before we get into some New Zealand news and the terrible things that are happening in New Zealand right now, that a lot of people probably don't know about, because our society is just getting as bad as any other body's societies right now because of what's happened in the last few years, and because of almost 8 years of socialism leadership. Because we have prime ministers in New Zealand, we don't have presidents. So our prime minister, Jacinda Ardern, was a diehard socialist, part of the Justin Trudeau network. So if you know what Justin Trudeau's about, they're in the same WEP. Is it WEP? World Economic Forum? WEF, right? The same sort of communist vein. You shall eat bugs and you'll love it. You shall own nothing and you'll love it. That kind of mentality, right? So we had to deal with that for the last 8 years, and we kind of got like a center right government in, and because everybody kind of thinks that if you do anything sort of like conservative, it's evil, and we've gotten to that point. However, our society in New Zealand is kind of trashy at the moment, which is kind of sad, because you look at Australia's in a similar vein. So the last couple of weeks, we've had, there's this thing that's happened. And so I thought we'll cross this. It's also happened in New Zealand. So it's Chinese ships in our waters, right? In our waters, basically, as well. And they're not supposed to be in our waters because they're our waters, right? So in the past, we've had like Japanese ships whaling, and we've had to put a stop to that. In our, whales. I mean, why the hell do you want to eat whale meat? There's enough fish, and there's enough chicken, there's enough beef, deer, lamb around, right? Did I say sheep again twice? So why would you want to eat things that delicacy, so-called, like eating turtles? What's the use of eating turtles? What's the use of eating dogs? All right, in Asia they still eat dogs. In China they still eat dogs. In China, in Asia I should say, in Philippines, in probably. I think they said that in Vietnam, and where's the other one? Might be Indonesia, but I know it's in Philippines. I just saw a video yesterday about it. Some dude got caught selling it because it's like rabies, and you're not supposed to sell dog meat, right? Because of rabies, human, you've seen Cujo, right? So that's why people not supposed to eat dog meat. But of course, and there's also horse meat, right? Why would you want to eat horse, right? The only thing I'm okay with is kangaroo, because there's so many of them and actually taste good. I think I had a back, what they call a back strap on a kangaroo, which is like the eye fillet on a beef, on a bovine. All right, so let's hit this one first.
Lurking in waters off Sydney, an unusual sight. 3 Chinese military ships travelling further south than they ever have before.
We are aware of this task group. We are monitoring this task group very closely. It is, as I understand it, operating in international waters.
Australia's Defence Department was watching closely, announcing on February 13 the flotilla was under observation.
Both naval.
So here's the thing, right? Sorry about stopping right away, but in the last couple of months, like the last few months since the end of last year, trawlers and Chinese trawlers, right, or hired by Chinese trawlers, these ships that are like basically about to be decommissioned, basically have ended up cutting up the undersea cables for internet in Europe, Norway. And the concern I had, and this is like last week, right, we had was like, well, is this what they're trying to do in our waters? Because why the hell are they here, right? You should be in your own waters, right? Dredging up your own backyard and fishing in your own backyard. Because as we know with these guys, they basically don't care about the size of fish. However, in New Zealand, we do. See, like if you got a snapper fish, you've got like 25 centimeters, I think it is. Anything under that, it's illegal, which means you can get arrested. right, by our MEF officers, which is Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. They will arrest you, or they'll take your fish off you, right? So if you go out fishing, just even as a hobbyist, whatever, day fisher, you go out on your boat or on the side of rocks and popular places, and you come in, and there's officer goes, hey, let's see what you got. And you go, oh, no, I'm not going to shoot. No. Let's see what you got. And if they find out that you've got undersized fish, they'll fine you, which you'll have to pay. If I remember right, you have to, you actually get instant fines, or you get fined to come and pay, show up or whatever, court, if there's major things, right? Or they'll just throw the fish back, throw it back out in the ocean. All right. Bye-bye. You go on, mate. Because see, there are laws to protect our waters because we're trying to protect them for generations to come. And that's why when you have these trawlers in our waters, they don't care about how much or what size of fish they take. They could take tonnages of undersized fish because back home, they don't care about the size of fish. They'll eat little things or big things. They don't care. And so with us, we need to protect our waters. And then also not that, then the undersea friggin' wires, right? The cables for internet connection. Now, if you cut that, you're going to topple a business of an entire country. No, actually, I shouldn't say business. You're going to topple an entire country. If like say it's going to take you a week to fix it, you're screwed for an entire week. So they could, in that same time, they could come in and start putting up, hacks and stuff like that, viruses into our system. And you wouldn't even know. Now, so I've been following this side of things, and this is why it got me a bit worried. Like, why are the Chinese now in our waters and in Aussies' waters? And I think we're a bit lax, and I think that's really bad if your government being lax about it. So I mean, I'm not in the government, so I don't know what they're doing, right, behind the scenes. But if I was there, I'd be going, okay, so we know that these Chinese people have been ships have been cutting up wires, right, dropping anchor, and causing the anchor to cut the wires in the deep sea. Now those guys got to spend a couple of weeks to a month trying to fix that. But in that time, their internet's down, their businesses are suffering because there's people aren't, using ATMs or not using FPOS and all that, online shopping, what have you. And that sort of delays, and that's kind of hurts the economy majorly. You saw what happened when we were going through COVID with the lockdowns, right? Small businesses were totally destroyed because all our, and this is what happened with our government, as I mentioned, right, with under the socialist thing, they only backed the big stores, right? Okay, if you're a big major store, yes, you're allowed to open. If you're a small store, you're cut off, right? You can't be open, right? So if you're a takeaway shop, no, you're not allowed to be open. But if you're a McDonald's, yeah, you can. If you're KFC, yeah, you're Pizza Hut, yeah. But not if you're a takeaway shop selling pies, selling chips, hot chips, fish and chips, or even if you're Asian store, right? Fried, what have you, yeah, noodles, whatever. But a lot of businesses went out of, basically shut down and have never got up again because of that. And this basically harmed our economy. And still now, those stores are still closed, right? About 3 years later, it was 2020, so 5 years later, they're still closed. They've gone, right? So we've got streets that have no, just empty stores sitting around. And that is not good for economy, especially if you're a tourist coming in and you go, well, I want to go and have lunch. Oh, what's the choices? Oh, it's only McDonald's or KFC or Pizza Hut. Well, I can get that back home. I thought I want to try some local cuisine. Oh, well, don't bother, mate. There isn't any. So this sort of thing has really ruined our economy, and it's been really hard to come up. And also everything's gone up, expensive as hell, right? I've just noticed that my power bill went up $40 in the last 2 months, and I didn't realize what's going on with my budgeting? Why am I so behind? Why is my bill so high? And then I realized, yeah, $40 for power just within a couple of months. Crazy, right? But the other thing here is all this stuff is really messing with our, it's keeping people on their toes. And it's like you're actually playing defensive instead of playing offensive. So it really sucks when, you've got this, because we don't really, we don't we're not like anti-China, but we don't, you know, we kind of like a balance sort of thing, right? We don't try to like get in their face, but we also need to get in their face now, especially if they're doing stuff like this.
And Air Force assets have been deployed to make sure that we are monitoring exactly what is occurring here.
For more than a week, the warships quietly made their way down Australia's east coast without incident until February 21, when their silent sail south ended with a bang. About 9:30 in the morning, the ships let loose, carrying out a live fire exercise in the Tasman Sea,
Yeah,
300 nautical miles off the Australian coast. But despite the Defence Force supposedly monitoring them, Australia had no idea the ships had opened fire. Instead, it was the pilot of a commercial passenger jet who first sounded the alarm. At 9:58 a.m, the pilot of Virgin Flight 161 from Sydney to Queenstown heard a warning from the warships over the radio about the live fire exercises. The Virgin pilot immediately relayed the information to Aviation Authority Air Services Australia, which issued an alert to all planes in the area.
The only way you knew about this was because a Virgin pilot heard about it. That's and correct. Called in.
Correct.
20 minutes later, an Emirates flight was also warned by the warships, while a Qantas plane flying...
See, that's us there, right? Christchurch, Queenstown. And by the way, Queenstown's a pretty cool place if you in Christchurch. New Zealand's a really cool place if you want somewhere, you know, I guess if you've got American dollars, it's 1.6, man. Like your $1 is $1.60 in New Zealand. So if you're looking to travel anywhere, you know, for a decent holiday, people that speak your language, you're not going to, you're not going to find someone, not understanding where you want to go. It's a good place to come to, right? Just like Australia as well. But I mean, I think we're more green. And we have nice beaches. That's one thing really cool. And, if you're into hiking, into nature and all that, and fishing, of course, as I mentioned, it's a good place. But just if you do come over, know what the laws are accordingly, because you don't want to get in trouble as a tourist.
It's behind diverts its path. Dozens of other planes that day also avoid the area.
So you were ahead of defence on this?
I wouldn't say we were ahead.
It's not a...
We became aware of the situation because
Alarmingly, the Australian Defence Force knew nothing until 30 minutes after the Chinese ships began their live fire exercise, when Air Services Australia raised the alarm. A failure slammed from all sides.
Is it the case that Defence was only notified
basically sleeping on the job, right?
Air Services Australia 28 minutes after the firing window commenced?
Yes, the notification was that call that had made from when the firing window opened, and that, in our view, is inadequate notification.
That's not inadequate. It's after it's...
So the thing here is, like, these guys are firing on each other, or training, whatever you want to call it. Why the hell are they training in our seas? We don't have any defensive training thing with China, right? As far as I know. Let me just find out. Like, where are we? Give me one sec. Does New Zealand and Australia have a defense training, what would you call that, network? Yes, with China. So what do you call it? Let's carry on with this.
From when the firing window opened, and that, in our view, is inadequate notification.
That's not inadequate. It's after it started.
It was extraordinary that the Prime Minister and Defence Minister told us they'd put in place an unprecedented surveillance operation around these three warships. And then to have the head of our military, Admiral Johnson, tell the Parliament, under oath I might add, that he didn't know whether live firing had happened on the Friday. It's extraordinary to me to have our military say they're doing unprecedented monitoring, but not be able to know if warships fired their weapons or not. That seems to be the lowest bar of capability we should expect.
Exactly. So here's what I found out, right? So you're going to allow me to play? Yeah, I think it's going to chop it up. So here we go. So Australia and New Zealand, like New Zealand and Australia, right? New Zealand and Australia do not maintain formal defense training networks with China. So they shouldn't be in our waters. 100% should be in our waters. We don't have anything to do with them when it comes to defense. Therefore, your warships should not be in us. And here's why I am for us being on the side of America, all right? And why Australia should be on the side of America, because we basically have the same belief system and laws and rights and freedoms, right? So we should be in line with America, and hopefully UK get their shit together and we can be in line with them as well. So here we go. So because at the end of the day, China has been threatening our economy and threatening our Pacific Islanders economy, as we've looked at here, right? With drugs, with mess, and we're going to have a little clip, little news headline, whatever, little news report about we just busted a huge $1 million meth import, right? Which is coming up next. But like, so yeah, so however, both nations have participated alongside China in multinational naval exercises such as Pakistan's Arman series, for instance, during Arman, whatever that is, 17 in February 2017, and naval assets from Australia, China, and other countries have collaborated to enhance maritime security and foster interoperability among participating navies. Right, so here's the next one. New Zealand and Australia do not maintain formal defense training, right? That was just repeat, I think. Now, the other thing here is, sadly, so in recent years, interactions between China and these nations have been marked by strategic caution, which basically means we really don't want to be working with you because we find out that you're actually undermining and putting up police stations in Western countries, which is undermining democracies and actually hunting down ex-Chinese democratic voices, right? And hunting down Hong Kong, hunting down former Chinese opposition party members, or so on, people who are like freedom, people who like want freedom for their nation from dictatorship. So notably, China has conducted naval exercises. Well, this is recent, right? So and here's the thing, right? So additionally, China has deployed surveillance ships to monitor exercises like the Talisman Sabre, a biannual joint military exercise between Australia and the United States. During Talisman Sabre 2023, 2 Chinese Navy spy ships observed the exercise from coastal regions of Northern Territory and Queensland. So if they did this 2 years ago, why went Australia a bit more onto it? And this is why this becomes a real problem, right? As this guy said, why was it half an hour after the fact, after these guys were firing at each other, missiles at each other, training, whatever you want to call it, then the government and the highest defense minister in the land in Australia says, well, we only found out half an hour ago, after the fact.
Standard international practice is to give 24 to 48 hours notice of any live fire exercise, but China gave Australia and New Zealand none. However,
how's that? You come into our waters and you start firing and you don't give us any warning, and the standard is 24 hours notice, so we can make sure that there's nobody in that area, right? No ships, no private vessels, no cargo ships, no submarines in the water. Right, and if you're around our undersea cables, we make sure that our ships there watching and keeping an eye on what you're doing. So this is why I don't trust China for anything they do. And a lot of times, a lot of people are out here on the internet listening to the propaganda. China's going to do this. China's going to do this. China is in a hell of a lot of shit back home. If you've been watching China Observer or any of the other actual reporting out of China, that actual people on the street are loading up online, going, "Hey, this is what's happening here," you'll notice that there is in protests against the government in the hundreds of thousands. And because the people haven't been paid for 6 months to a year, so they're living in poverty, hand to mouth, and some of them don't even haven't been paid, so they've been fighting to get their money back, right? If you're an overseas worker, you're lucky if you get it. If you're local, you forget it. It's gone. You'll never get it. The boss has already run off with all the earnings, and he's like, my business is falling down, so I'm going to take whatever I've got in my bank account and I'm leaving. Screw the workers. And this is not just one or two. These are thousands of businesses that are doing this. And the other thing is, right now, Indonesia, we're going to be looking at that when we look at Asia, right? Indonesia's been having a huge anti-China thing going on because Indonesia, there is nickel. Nickel's what they, put into, nickel's very useful in mobile phones. And I don't know much about nickel. I've got to look into this. Well, I'm like, we will talk about that when we get to that in a future stream. But they've basically been polluting and worker safety. 18 people died, right, on one day because the worker safety wasn't followed. Indonesian law wasn't followed. So these Chinese operators, right, factory owners and all that, basically signed up to, hey, bribe, like they did in Africa. We looked at Africa, how China's been bribing the militias to get to the minerals in Africa, right, to the gold and stuff. So they've been doing the same in Indonesia to get to the nickel. And so 50% of the world's nickel reserves is now in the hands of China, right? And this is what's been reported, right? So it could be more, it could be less, but 50% is your going amount right now. So they've been, and Indonesia has quite a lot in their underground, right? So they basically went in and started like bribing all the ministers to do with the land and rights and all that, and selling out their own people who are living there. And so for the future, that's all going to be polluted, all that land. So there's going to be no food growing, no animals be able to live on it. And so therefore you can't have people living on it because it's, and you're going to get diseases, viruses, breaking down your bodies, like Bhopal did in India when that, what's it called? It was like that fertilizer company, right? The American fertilizer company, and that basically fell apart and polluted the entire state of Bhopal. I think it was most of Bhopal, and children who grew up with defects, right? So that was in India. That was only about 1990s or 2000s.
Papua New Guinea was briefed weeks prior.
The fact that
here's the thing, right? So if Papua New Guinea was briefed weeks prior, and this is the thing. So China has been, if we looked at this before, when we looked at Pacific Islands and how China influenced the Pacific Islands, why would Papua New Guinea be briefed weeks ahead? Because they have a deal with China, because China's got a lot of investment in some of the Pacific Islands here, right? And so, of course, you're gonna, your partners. But hey, Australian news is, is very wary of what's going on, and this is what's been worrying a lot of our economies around here, especially Australia and New Zealand, about what's been happening in Fiji and the Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Cook Islands, and how they've been taking loans from China to build their infrastructure rather than working on their own, right? Or trying to get investments from people that they can trust. Oh no, we're just going to go to China, they're going to get big loans. Problem with big loans is one day it's going to come in, and if you take big loans and if you can't pay it back, well, we're going to take all your mineral rights.
That gave Australia and New Zealand none. However, Papua New Guinea was briefed weeks prior.
The fact that China's ambassador to PNG in the South Pacific has their office in Canberra, and yet the Chinese ambassador didn't pick up the phone to make a local call to Foreign Affairs or Defence or the Foreign Minister or the Defence Minister, that tells you it was a willful decision to not give Australia advance warning. That that's a deliberate act.
China.
Yeah, and I would say that's a act of an enemy, not a friend. So that's why I'm saying, like, you can no longer see, you can no longer treat China with kitty gloves because of all this threats they're doing, right? It's a threat. You come into my water and you start blowing, doing tests in our water. Go do it in your own waters. Hey, it's a vast friggin' area around your country, right? Right? Because you're like, oh, we own all this in Asia, right? We're going to take over there. But like, how dare you come into our waters? Because if you come into our waters, then we should be able to defend ourselves. But here's the problem with like peacetime, right? When it's peacetime, people and countries sleep a lot, right? They're too busy distracted by everything else, while the enemy is at your back door, right? As they say. In this case, at your front door, right? And knocking on it and going, oh, we're just going to throw around some bombs and we don't want to let you know. Or are we going to let off some firecrackers in your yard? Basically, don't worry about your dogs. Yeah, don't. We're not going to tell you to tie your dogs up, but we're just going to keep throwing away firecrackers. That kind of like baseline behavior, right? So it's. I've been watching this like China for about maybe 2-3 years now, and their action all across the board. Not just like, okay, the poisoning of the foods, cheap products, right? Infected products with bugs sold on Temu, right? Like children's nappies and clothing that blow, bit of flame and catches on fire and like basically burns a baby, right? 80% of a body, that sort of thing, So we're going to be looking at that later. I've got a plan to look at the poisoning and defective materials being sold on Temu, which everybody seems to go, oh, it's cheap, so we might as well buy it. It's like, yeah, but do you want to put your children, your babies, family at harm's way like that for cheap rubbish or
Says
products?
Australia has hyped up its concerns, claiming it issued.
And here's the thing, this is what China always does, right? So whenever you go, hey, we don't like what you're doing, they go, oh, but it's your fault. It's gaslighting. They do gaslight a lot.
That's a deliberate act.
China says Australia has hyped up its concerns, claiming it issued repeated safety notices well in advance. And while it may have only been a drill, the danger was still very real.
Chinese were using weapons that had a range up to 50,000 feet in altitude, so that could have placed aircraft at risk.
What we're hearing is how this was all perfectly safe, and the only problem was they didn't give enough advance warning. But there was real danger of a civilian airliner being shot down, because live fire drills can involve not just naval gunfire, but firing high-altitude surface-to-air missiles. So the risk...
So my brain just ticked off, right? So I want to show you guys something that just happened this week, last couple of days ago, yesterday even. So this is from Korean news, right? Let me see if I can find it quickly. And this is what live news, right? I mean, live rounds, sorry, apologies. Live rounds. And this is it here, 16 hours ago. Okay. So this is how dangerous this is when this guy's talking about danger when you're using live rounds, right? So this happened in Korea between Korea, during a Korean and American training, right?
Frightening accident took place earlier on this Thursday in the city of Pocheon. 2 South Korean fighter jets dropped a series of bombs on a civilian area during a training session, injuring over a dozen people. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
Several civilians were injured after bombs fell on a residential area in the northern city of Pocheon, Gyeonggi province on Thursday morning. According to related authorities, bombs had fallen on Pocheon's Dogongri at around 10:04 a.m., destroying several buildings. Bombs came from the Joint Air and Ground Force live fire training exercises between South Korea and the U.S. that were being held in connection with the annual springtime exercise, the 2025 Freedom Shield, slated to kick off on March 10th. The exercise involved the Korean Air Force, Army, and U.S. Forces Korea taking place at the Singjin Fire Training Field in Pocheon, with the Air Force deploying a total of 13 combat aircraft, including the F-35A, F-15K, KF-16, and FA-50. No fighter jets of U.S. Forces Korea had been deployed. 8 Mk-82 general-purpose bombs were wrongly dropped from 2 KF-16 fighter jets, 4 from each. This confirmed by the Korean Air Force through a text message to reporters. Mk-82 bombs are used to destroy structures such as buildings and bridges, and reportedly have enough power to create a blast crater 8 meters in diameter and 2.4 meters deep. They are dropped using an unguided method rather than a GPS-guided system. The wrongly dropped 8 MK.
So if they had the GPS, they could have like basically moved it somewhere else, right? Like talking about like they had no guided systems on it. So this is what I was thinking. I was like, when I was watching this, couldn't they like turn off, like disconnect like the trigger, whatever mechanism, like, you know, especially in our modern age, right? You can basically go, okay, turn off the firing pin, or like, or lock down the explosive area, because we're very advanced, right, when it comes to technology and especially weaponry, because most of these technology is actually brought, you know, is created or advanced, right, R&D in military circumstances. So I was thinking, well, couldn't they do that? But these didn't have them, and so was it like 4 of them got dropped, accidentally released, right? So either there was a fault, or someone in the cockpit pressed the wrong button, right? The release button, instead of like not even touching that. So they might finger slip, but two doing it at the same time, that's crazy. That's like, it's not like, what is it called? Accidental, right? Doesn't seem accidental if there's 2 of them doing it. So there seems like there must be something wrong with these, either the locking mechanism, because that's dangerous, because that could have been like a lot of people injured, right? But nobody has been reported as being like killed or anything like that at this moment.
82 general-purpose bombs landed outside a shooting range in a non-designated area. The impact points of all 8 bombs were confirmed, and the Air Force said there were no unexploded bombs. It has reportedly established an accident response committee to investigate the exact circumstances of the incident and assess the damage. The Korean Air Force added that it deeply regrets the civilian damage caused by the bomb drop and expressed sincere wishes for the quick recovery of the injured. It further noted that necessary measures, including compensation, would actively be carried out. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Right. This is why I'm saying why you need 24-hour notice about what's going to happen, you know, and if there's any sort of like, you know, if you got these ships out here basically blasting away at each other, especially when you got planes up there, right, that these missiles can reach.
Advance warning, but there was real danger of a civilian airliner being shot down, because live fire drills can involve not just naval gunfire, but firing high altitude surface to air missiles. So the risk was real. If an airliner had been shot down, it wouldn't have been one death, it would have been everybody on board.
While the government vowed to seek answers,
we do have concerns about the transparency associated with this and the notice, and I certainly will be having a discussion with Foreign Minister Wang about that.
I don't think we have a satisfactory answer from China as to the question of the notice.
The ship's location means China technically broke no rules.
They are in international waters. They are completely within the bounds of international law.
Normally, navies conduct live fire drills on designated training ranges in chunks of water, or in parts of the world's oceans where they aren't putting at risk civilian airliners flying overhead or civilian ships blundering into the area. And normally, navies give advance notice. The Chinese did none of those things.
No, they will.
And it came just days after another alarming incident. On February 11, an RAAF Poseidon jet was conducting routine surveillance of the South China Sea when it was challenged by two Chinese J-16 jets. One of them releasing flares just 30 metres away from the Australian plane.
The proximity of the Chinese Air Force plane was so close that there's no way you could have maintained control over those flares.
There were a dozen Air Force personnel on board, but thankfully no one was injured.
There was danger, and had those flares hit the P-8, there was the potential for significant damage to our aircraft.
Had those flares gone into the intake of that Poseidon, we could have lost the aircraft and the crew, about 12 people. So at the one hand, that they are undertaking very unprofessional and dangerous and provocative and aggressive activities in the South China Sea. At the same time, they're deploying a very powerful naval task force close to Australia and now conducting live fire exercises. This is all about signalling. This is not just a naval operation per se to train the Chinese Navy. This is about signalling to us China's intent to be the dominant actor in our region.
These close calls, considered deliberate and calculated shows of force from an increasingly arrogant Beijing.
They are practicing and rehearsing, and they are collecting.
What do you think they're rehearsing for? Land strike missions against Australian infrastructure and bases. We should be worried about the long-term implications of what's going on.
The federal government believes China not only wants to show its military reach, but normalise its presence in the region. Others think there might be a more sinister intent.
At a pure safety level, we should be concerned. At a strategic level, we should also be concerned, because this exercise, this deployment is not just normal. This is about strategic signalling from Beijing to Canberra, saying to us that China can project its maritime power and its naval capabilities whenever it wants, wherever it wants. It can do whatever it wants.
Raising serious questions about Australia's readiness to respond to a military threat.
For about 10 years now, it's been in every government document of both sides of government that Australia's distance and location no longer protects us from military threat. These warships...
That's the same with New Zealand, right? That's why they're challenging our waters and challenging our, what we're doing. Because here, all across here is the Pacific Islands, right? They've already bought up these guys' allegiance to China with loans and stuff. And across here, Fiji's right here, right? And over here, I think is that Tokelau? Or is it Samoa? I can't remember who that is there. But there's Indonesia. Too close to call, man. I think playing blasé or playing catch up with China is not the way forward anymore. And this is why I'm saying, New Zealand should get in line with America, because they're they're a superpower. They speak our language. We have aligned beliefs, right? When it comes to freedoms and laws and rights, right? Because in China, there are no rights, right? You have no rights in China. So how in Korea, we just saw that video about how in Korea, the army said, we're gonna make sure. Whenever I press that one, I need to get rid of that one. It always makes me disappear. There's all these windows there on this new setup for StreamYard. So, yeah, I think we should stop, playing kitty gloves with China, because from what I've seen for the last 3 years, they've become more and more aggressive. Like after they took over Hong Kong, it's like, okay, you gave us one. Well, we want Taiwan now. Oh, you got Taiwan. Oh, now we want Philippines. Right. So basically, China has been undermining Asian countries, South American countries, South Africa, right, and Africa, North Africa, undermining that with the mineral rights and stuff, with huge billion-dollar loans, which they'll collect. And there's a problem with loans and stuff, is that one day somebody will come to collect. And if you're doing it with China, they've already started collecting. And, you know, the problem is that when you're not able to pay, they'll take whatever else you got. And mainly, they'll take land. Because all China is interested in is minerals, land, and resources that you have to offer. Your fishing, because they've got billions of people, right? Like, is it like about 2 billion or is it 1 billion in China, right? Let me just check that. What's the population of China right now? What's the population of mainland? Should say mainland China. What are you saying to me? As of the end of 2024, mainland China was approximately 1.4 billion people, right? Marking a decrease of 1.39 million from the previous year, which is because they're not having kids. As we watched, you know, we talked about on this channel before, not only are they not having kids, they're also not getting married. And they're not looking to get married. They're not looking to have kids because it's so, they're so poor now that they can't even afford to have children or to get married. Because to get married, you have to have a good job and you have to have a house or apartment that's paid off, right? And you can't really do that. And then also you got to raise a child and you got to have a car. And this is what's the demand has been, you know? And so people, young guys are going, well, screw this. So 100 million of them going, yeah, I'm not going to get married. I don't even want to be in a relationship. That's how bad it's gotten in China. And yet people going, oh yeah, China's going to surpass the world. But like China's just saber rattling, but also very aggressive, as we just saw in our waters in Australia and New Zealand. But as I mentioned before, and we looked at that in the previous, when we looked at Pacific and influences there, you know, how they've been basically just undermining and trying to get into, into politics, influence politics through bribery.
Calm your nips. We're still besties, yeah? I think I deserve a little more faith than this.